In the heart of a quiet Amish community, Isaac Miller, a humble blacksmith, spent years perfecting a design no one believed could endure. It was a tool so simple, yet so sturdy, that its legacy would outlast even the most modern of machines. The forgotten design he forged in his shop remains a testament to the craftsmanship of a time when hands and heart shaped more than just iron, they shaped survival. Before we begin, share where you're watching from, and if stories of faith, perseverance, and craftsmanship resonate with you, join us for tomorrow's tale. Isaac Miller had always worked in silence, the rhythm of his hammer striking the anvil the only music in the small, dimly lit blacksmith shop. The steady beat of metal on metal seemed to match the pulse of the earth beneath his boots, a constant reminder of the work that kept his family and community together. But as he swung the hammer, day after day, a feeling gnawed at him that what he was building wasn't just a tool, but something that could change the way people looked at the simple things in life. Isaac's blacksmith shop was tucked away behind the row of modest homes in the heart of the Amish village. It was a place where the hum of the forge and the scent of burning coal were as familiar as the sight of the horses that trotted down the dirt roads. He'd learned the trade from his father, just as his father had learned it from his own. In this family of blacksmiths, the craft was a quiet calling, passed down like a sacred promise. But Isaac had always been different. He was an inventor at heart, a man who believed that every piece of iron he shaped could be made better. While others were content with the tried-and-true tools that had served their ancestors, Isaac found himself in his shop long after the day's work had ended, sketching plans for new designs in the margins of his Bible. He was convinced that with enough patience and care, he could craft something more than just a tool. He could craft something timeless. For months, Isaac worked on a design for a plow, one that would be simpler to use but just as sturdy as the old-fashioned models that had been passed down through the years. He had studied every part of the plow, noting where it was vulnerable to wear, where it could be improved, and how it could be crafted to last longer without sacrificing efficiency. It was an idea that had come to him in the dead of winter, as he sat by the fire, his mind wandering from the tasks of the day. The first time Isaac revealed his design to his fellow blacksmiths, they laughed. "You're wasting your time," they said. "There's no need to change what's been working for generations." But Isaac didn't listen. He could see something others couldn't, a plow that would stand the test of time, a tool that would carry the same strength and simplicity as the Amish way of life. In the following weeks, Isaac poured every ounce of his energy into the plow. With each hammer strike, he felt the weight of his ancestors' expectations and the strength of his own resolve. The metal gleamed with a beauty that no other plow had ever possessed. And when the last rivet was hammered into place, Isaac stood back, admiring his creation with a sense of pride that only a blacksmith could know. The test came sooner than Isaac had expected. The next morning, a neighbor named Jacob came to the shop, his horses tethered outside. "Isaac," he called, "the ground's ready for plowing. Will you try that new plow of yours?" Isaac nodded, a quiet sense of anticipation rising in his chest. He led Jacob out to the field where the earth lay waiting, a vast expanse of fertile soil that would soon be turned for planting. Jacob took the reins, guiding the horses as Isaac attached the plow to the yoke. Isaac's hands trembled slightly as he gave Jacob a nod, signaling him to begin. As the horses moved forward, Isaac watched in silence. The plow cut through the earth effortlessly, its blades slicing through the soil with a precision that left Isaac in awe. Jacob didn't stop to adjust it, didn't have to fight with the horses to keep them on track. The plow moved like it had been part of the land itself. Isaac couldn't help but smile. His design, his long hours of work, had paid off. The plow was everything he had hoped it would be: strong, efficient, and timeless. In the days that followed, word spread through the village like wildfire. The new plow Isaac had crafted was unlike any other, a simple yet powerful tool that made the work of the fields easier and faster. One by one, Isaac's neighbors came to his shop, eager to see the plow for themselves. Some were skeptical at first, but after watching the plow at work, their doubts melted away like the morning mist. Isaac's reputation as a craftsman grew, and with it, a quiet but steady stream of requests for more of his plows. It wasn't just the design that caught people's full attention, but the way the plow seemed to capture the very essence of Amish life. practical, reliable, and built to last. Isaac's plows became a symbol of his dedication to the land, his family, and his faith. But despite his growing success, Isaac remained humble. He didn't see himself as an inventor or a master craftsman. He was simply a man trying to do the right thing, to build something that would make life a little bit easier for those around him. For Isaac, the work wasn't about recognition or fame, it was about the quiet satisfaction that came from creating something that mattered. In the quiet hours of the night, when the shop was still and the forge had cooled, Isaac would sit by the fire and think about his plow. He wondered if it would stand the test of time, if it would be remembered long after he was gone. He hoped it would, but he knew that his work wasn't about the legacy he left behind, it was about the hands that would use it, the fields that would be plowed, and the people who would benefit from it. Isaac's plows would endure not because they were crafted with perfection, but because they were crafted with purpose. And that purpose would carry on, long after the last stroke of the hammer had fallen. The simple design, the steady work of Isaac's hands, would live on as a reminder of the strength and endurance that had always defined the Amish way of life. Isaac Miller's shop, once a quiet retreat from the hustle of farm life, had transformed into a bustling center of activity. It wasn't just the plows that were selling, people were coming to Isaac for all manner of tools and repairs. His name, once spoken in whispers of skepticism, was now known far beyond the edges of his small Amish community. But despite the growing demand for his work, Isaac remained unchanged. He still woke before dawn, still labored by the light of the forge, and still saw the world through the humble lens of his upbringing. The shop was a reflection of him, organized, efficient, and built with purpose. Each tool had its place. Each piece of metal was shaped with the same care as the first plow he had forged. But now, Isaac's work was about more than the product, it was about the trust he had built with his neighbors. A handshake, a word, and Isaac's promise was as solid as the steel he worked with. And that bond, formed in the heat of the forge and under the weight of years, was something that no amount of success could ever replace. One afternoon, a man from a nearby settlement, Jacob Lance, came to Isaac with a request that Isaac hadn't expected. Jacob's farm had recently been hit by a terrible storm. The wind had torn through the valley, ripping off roof shingles and causing the small barn to collapse in on itself. In the aftermath, Jacob had found that the damage to the barn was beyond his ability to repair. "I've heard of your work," Jacob said, his voice low with a mixture of respect and urgency. "I need a new roof, Isaac, and I need it before winter hits. Can you help me?" Isaac paused, considering the request. He had always been a man of few words, but when it came to a promise, his word was always true. The thought of a family without shelter before the first snow came didn't sit right with him. Without hesitation, he extended his hand, his calloused fingers firm on Jacob's. "I'll have the materials by tomorrow," Isaac said. "I'll help you rebuild your barn. You'll have a roof by the time the frost comes." Jacob smiled, relief washing over him. "I knew I could count on you, Isaac." The next morning, Isaac stood in his shop, surrounded by the tools of his trade. The fire was stoked high, the anvil waiting patiently for the strike of the hammer. Isaac's mind was focused not just on the materials or the work at hand, but on something more profound, the responsibility he carried with each piece of work he did. A man's word was his bond, and Isaac had given his word that Jacob would have a roof. Nothing short of his best would do. He made the necessary preparations, cutting wood, shaping metal supports, gathering nails, and reinforcing the framework that would make the barn strong enough to withstand the weight of snow and storms. As the day passed, Isaac's determination never wavered. There was a quiet dignity in his work, one that spoke more to his character than any piece of iron ever could. By evening, the barn had a new roof. The family could rest easy, knowing they were safe, thanks to Isaac's quiet, steadfast promise. As Jacob stood in the doorway of his new barn, watching Isaac work, he couldn't help but reflect on the man's legacy. Isaac wasn't just a blacksmith. He was a pillar of his community, a man whose word was as strong as the iron he shaped. It wasn't just about the plows or the repairs, it was about the trust he had built, one hammer strike at a time. As the seasons passed, Isaac's fame as a blacksmith spread beyond the surrounding towns. Travelers came, some with their own designs, others seeking repairs. but always with the same respect for the work that Isaac had done. The quiet blacksmith, who had once been dismissed as a man too cautious for frontier life, had become a cornerstone of the community, a man whose hands had touched every corner of the valley. One winter, a particularly harsh storm swept through the area, isolating Isaac's community from the rest of the world. The roads were impassable, the wind biting and cold. In a small settlement like theirs, that could mean disaster. The supply lines were cut off, and the people were left to rely on their own skills to survive. Isaac had never been one for panic, and this storm was no different. As the wind howled and the snow piled high against the windows of his shop, Isaac continued to work, the rhythmic sound of his hammer in perfect sync with the pulse of the storm outside. But then, in the midst of the storm, a knock on the door interrupted the steady rhythm. Isaac turned, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. He was surprised to find Daniel, a local farmer, standing in the doorway. The man's face was pale, and his eyes betrayed the desperation in his voice. "Isaac," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "The cattle are out, the fence is down, I can't fix it alone, the snow is too deep, I need help." Isaac hesitated only for a moment. He knew what the storm had done to the land, how dangerous it could be to travel in such conditions. But he also knew that the cattle's survival meant the difference between life and death for Daniel's family. Without a word, Isaac grabbed his coat, his boots, and his gloves. He pulled his scarf tight around his neck and stepped into the biting cold. He could feel the weight of the storm pressing in on him, but it didn't matter. There was a job to be done, and that was all that mattered. Together, Isaac and Daniel made their way through the deep snow to the fence. The wind pushed against them, biting at their exposed skin. The storm howled like a living thing, threatening to pull them off course with every gust. But Isaac's resolve remained unwavering. He wasn't a man of many words, but his actions spoke louder than anything he could say. By the time they finished repairing the fence, the storm had subsided slightly, though the snow still clung to the land. The cattle were safe, and the farm was secure for another season. Isaac had helped save what was necessary, and as they walked back to the warmth of the barn, Daniel couldn't help but express his gratitude. "Isaac," Daniel said, his voice full of awe, "you've saved me today. I don't know how to repay you." Isaac simply shook his head, his gaze steady but kind. "You don't have to repay me, Daniel. We're a community. We help one another. That's what matters." As Isaac made his way back home, the weight of the iron in his hands seemed lighter than ever. It wasn't the tools that had saved the day. It was the spirit of the work, the quiet strength of a man who had built more than just a reputation. He had built a legacy of trust, of duty, and of faith. And in the end, that was what would carry him through the hardest of winters. The years passed, and Isaac Miller's name became a quiet legend, whispered with reverence among the valley's people. He had forged more than just metal in his blacksmith shop. He had forged relationships that withstood the tests of time, weather, and hardship. In the glow of the forge, Isaac found his peace not in wealth or fame, but in the simple satisfaction of knowing his work made the lives of those around him just a little bit easier. One evening, as the warmth of the fire danced on the stone walls of his shop, Isaac sat alone by the hearth, his hands resting in his lap. The world outside was quiet, save for the soft rustle of the wind through the trees. He thought of the years of labor, the plows, the repairs, the promises kept, and of the community he had helped build, not just through metal, but through trust and humility. As the fire crackled, Isaac realized that his legacy wasn't just in the tools he had made, but in the quiet acts of faith and service that had shaped his life. And in the end, that was all that mattered: the work of his hands, the warmth of his heart, and the bonds he had forged that would outlast the forge itself.